Now I'd like to talk about a couple of additional problem areas when it comes to time management and how best to troubleshoot those problem areas. The first one is the commute. Many students have commutes to and from school when they're attending university. Sometimes they have to drive, other times they need to take mass transit. And it's really easy to think about your commute as just wasted time. Time that you could be studying, but instead you're having to get yourself from one place to another. My tip for my commuters is to think about ways to power up your commute, to make it productive rather than wasted time. Now, of course, you can't do all academic tasks while you're commuting, especially if you're driving yourself. You're not going to be able to read a complex document. You're not going to be able to do problem sets. But commuting, especially when you're in mass transit, is a great time to review study cards, flashcards for a foreign language class, or to do iterative note review, to look at the notes that you took in lecture that day and to try to remember what the key important points were from that lecture. That turns your commute into productive study time, and the time that you spend doing that doesn't have to be spent doing it later. If you're a person who commutes in the car and you're driving yourself, think about taping some of your lectures and re-listening to them in the car, or trying to get some books that you're reading for class on tape so that you can listen to them. It's also a great way while you're driving to just try to think back on your lectures and think about what was covered and think about the most important topics. Again, it sounds really simple, but that act of recalling what you heard in lecture while you're in the car, is going to help increase your comprehension and retention. So again, don't think about the commute as wasted time. Think about it as an opportunity to do kinds of studying that you are able to do. I'd now like to talk a little bit about students who work either part-time or full-time while they're in school. This is an incredibly admirable thing to do, but it's also really challenging because you're taking the demands of a workplace and you're adding them to the demands of your curriculum in college. Here's my tip for people who work while they're in school. 1, be realistic about what your demands of work and what your demands from school are going to look like, and understand that it may not be possible to work full-time and go to school full-time. Those two things are going to be very difficult to accomplish at the same time without giving up some quality on one end or the other. So be realistic about what it's going to look like, and understand, of course, that every semester of school is different and every semester at work will be different. And so depending on what's going on at one or the other, the balance is going to look a little bit different. The second thing I would say is to be as transparent and communicative with your instructors in school as possible about your work situation. It may be the case that they're willing to offer you accommodations to help you manage your work schedule with your academic commitments. But asking for accommodations early and proactively is the best way to receive accommodations. So if there are things you think you are going to need in order to accommodate your work schedule, make sure to ask for them early and make sure to be prepared to explain what it is that you need and why. A word on procrastination. Procrastination is something that college students struggle with a lot, and it's something that I've struggled with in my past. It's very easy to think that you're the kind of person who works best under pressure and who produces their best work when they have very little time. But here's the difficult reality. Procrastination is a learned behavior. It's not something you are naturally. It's not something that's been born into you. It's something you've learned how to do. If you're a procrastinator, the reason you do your best work under pressure, or feel like you do, is because you've practiced working under pressure over and over and over again. And when we practice something enough, we get pretty good at it. And we start to think that that's the only way that we work. Here's the good news. Procrastination is a learned behavior, and it can be unlearned by making small, manageable, thoughtful changes to the way we approach our tasks. Let me give you one example. If you have a paper due at a particular moment, it would be easy to procrastinate and push starting that paper and writing that paper until the very end, perhaps resulting in an all-nighter to get it done. What you could do instead is, understanding that you're likely to push that deadline back, you might create a new deadline with your professor. Say, offer to give him an outline of your work 2 weeks before the paper is due. By making yourself accountable to someone other than yourself, and by saying to the professor that you'd like to turn in work ahead of time, you've now created a deadline before the deadline. And so even if you procrastinate on that original deadline, you're still ahead of the game when it comes to writing the paper. So do anything you can to create a situation or a scenario where you have deadlines before the actual deadline that force you and encourage you to start the task before it's due. Again, we learn to procrastinate and we get good at procrastinating because we do it a lot. And even though we've learned it, we can unlearn it. Overcommitment. If you're committed to doing 27 hours of work in a 24-hour period, you will always feel like your time is poorly managed. People who say yes to everything often have trouble doing any one of those things particularly well. They just have too much on their plate and they're spread too thin. If you're a yes person, if you're a person who's overcommitted, if you're a person who has extracurricular activities crowding out the things that you have to do at school, crowding out the things you have to do in your life, if you find yourself dropping balls, see what you can reasonably give up, see what kind of tasks are in your life that you might delegate to other people, and critically, cultivate the ability to say no when it's not something that you can reasonably do. Prioritization. If you have a lot on your plate, and if you're trying to manage your time effectively, it's important to make sure that you understand how important the different tasks are that you need to complete. Not every task is equally important, and so not every task should be treated as if it's equally important. There are lots of ways to do this, but I'd like to share with you just one, and that is the Eisenhower grid for prioritization. Here you'll see 4 categories of activities. Activities that are important and urgent, those activities that should be done right now by you. Activities that are important and not urgent, those things that are going to matter but don't matter right away. Those are activities that can be planned for. Activities that are not important but urgent, such as immediate interruptions or urgent distractions. Those things that can be done and probably should be dealt with, but don't need to be done by you. Those activities can be delegated to others. And finally, activities that are not important and that are not urgent. These are the things in our life that waste our time. You might even call this the category of guilty pleasures. If you're able to minimize the amount of time you invest in these activities, or if you're able to avoid them altogether, you can take the time that you're spending on those activities and you can put it into other activities that are more important or more urgent. This is the Eisenhower method because this is how President Eisenhower prioritized the tasks in his life. And finally, the most important tip I can give is to cultivate the practice of honest and accurate self-reflection when you're thinking about how you manage your time. People can give you tips all day long. People can give you strategies on how to do this or how to do that. But your process is personal to you, and nobody is going to understand your process or what your process results in better than you. And so the ability to look at your own process, identify strengths and weaknesses, continue to bolster those strengths, and address those weaknesses is going to help you to continue to make progress in making your process a more efficient, more effective process. So for example, if you're studying for a midterm exam and you have 10 hours to study for that exam and you use them in a particular way, when you're done with the exam, you might think back on those 10 hours now that you've taken the exam and think to yourself, could that time have been used more effectively? Where did I get it right? And where could I have done it better? If you're able to do that and then turn that reflection into action, you can continue to make your progress more robust and more effective. And if you're having a little bit of trouble with that self-reflection piece, consider talking to a professor or a friend to help you think about your own process out loud. Sometimes talking to someone else helps us articulate for ourselves what it is we need to do and makes it a little bit easier to make our process more efficient and more effective. Again, all of these trouble spots are pretty common, and different people are going to struggle with one more than another. And so you shouldn't feel bad if prioritization is something you struggle with, or if you're a little bit of a procrastinator. It's not about beating yourself up about the thing you struggle with. It's important. It's being able to identify what that thing is and doing everything in your power to make changes to make it less of an issue for you moving forward.